down. We're hoping this is temporary, but we still don't really know the full effects of this. There is no historic data or situation to compare to what we're facing right now. So due to the COVID-19 closures, unemployment rates have been at unprecedented highs. I'm going to speak more on this on a future slide, but the unemployment has been high on a national, state, and local level. Fortunately for us, it's not been as much of an impact in this county as it has in the state and national level, but we'll talk more about that in a future slide. So in addition to the record levels of unemployment, we also had a real estate value reappraisal in 2020 for the 2021 tax year, and our district saw a 9% increase. So that is not actually included in the forecast. I just got that information late last week. We estimated about a 2.5% increase. So we'll have more on that a little bit later too, but I wanted to put that out there that we saw a 9% increase in our value, which is just crazy. And in addition, in addition to the real estate, there was also should be better now, sorry. In addition, because of the high levels of unemployment, we were very concerned about our income tax revenue and how the collection was going to go. I estimated in May very conservatively, but as you'll see later on, that I have adjusted that estimate based on what we have collected in July and October of this year and what we're seeing in the unemployment rates. So this chart goes back to 2007, which is before the recession of 2008. The green is Greene County, not the green, the yellow is Greene County, the blue is Ohio, and the purple is the United States as a whole. So as you can see, we've kind of followed the same line, but over on the right side, when we get to 2020, where we see the spike, Greene County topped out about just below 13%, whereas the United States and Ohio were impacted much more severely. So we were very fortunate that our community was not as impacted as the rest of the state and country. And I think we saw this with our income tax collections that we received in July and October, that even though we had high record levels of unemployment, we still collected not too far from what we anticipated. And there's also school district income tax is also paid on unemployment. And because there was that extra unemployment that employees could receive, there was a little boost to the income tax that we received as well. So we were not as impacted by that as I expected us to be in May. Additionally, there's uncertainty because we have two biennial budgets in this forecast period. That could potentially be a new governor. We don't know what's going to happen with the budgets. There's a fair school funding. Looks really good for our district. So of course, none of that is reflected now because it's just in the discussions. But I think that it just shows you that there's so much uncertainty. We don't know what the next two budgets are going to look like. We don't know if the student wellness and success funding is going to continue. 2 years or almost 2 years ago, when the governor put the student wellness and success funding out there, it was made pretty clear that that was something he was passionate about and something that he expected to continue. But of course, that was before COVID. So at this point, I don't know. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen with unemployment, real estate tax collection. While the rates went up, we don't know yet how many people are going to end up in foreclosure or unable to pay their taxes because of this situation. Income tax collection, while it's been better than we expected initially, we just don't know. We still don't know how long this is going to last. So again, those are just some of the uncertainty out there around this forecast. We also have negotiated agreements with both unions that expire at the end of this fiscal year. So we don't know what the next contracts are going to look like just yet. So our revenue for fiscal year 21 is expected to be, now this is much better than the May forecast, so I'm feeling really good about this. 50,763,371. That's made up of almost 50% state funding and 50% local funding. We're almost exactly in the middle. So this creates a little bit of risk for us because any changes to the state budget can have a significant impact on us. Changes and effects to the local economy, like the unemployment rate, can also have a significant impact on our budget. So we're a little bit of at risk either way. And then of course we've got this situation that could affect local and state funding. So just keep that in mind. Our state budget is 49% of our revenue. The state budget cut for fiscal year 21 was held to the same level as we were cut in May of fiscal year 20, $850,000. That was about 3.7% of our budget, our revenue. So we were luckier than some other schools, but that is a significant amount for us. As I've mentioned, there's new legislature right now for the Fair School Funding Formula that could mean $6 million a year more for our district, which is huge and could change this forecast completely. Again, we have multiple bienniums to get through. What we forecasted for state revenue and state funding is to hold it at the fiscal year 19 levels. At this point, we just don't know what the next two bienniums and what the budgets are going to be. So the best guess that we have at this time is that it shouldn't be any lower than what we received in fiscal year 19. Another hit to our revenue was the casino revenue. Obviously, the casinos were closed down. So that's about $130,000 a year for us in a typical year. This year, we expect about 30% of that, if that. So I just wanted to give you a visual for our state funding over the 3 years of actual and 5 years of the forecast period, and just kind of show you the yellow. This looks like a pencil, which was completely accidental. The yellow is our state foundation. That's the basic aid that we receive from the state. So we're just estimating that as just a flat level for the forecast period. The green, bluish green is economically disadvantaged aid, and career tech is a very small sliver of green in there. And based on what we hear, we expect those to remain about the same. Again, if the Fair School Funding Formula gets pushed through, that could also increase because those are also important items in that formula. Also from the state, we receive rollback and homestead reimbursement on property taxes. And this year, fiscal year 21, is the last year that we're going to receive any of the fiscal TPP reimbursement. It's only about $70,000, but this is the last year that we will receive that. Moving on to the income tax revenue, we've got 3 years of actual again and 5 years of estimates. In addition, because our income tax revenue on the forecast up at the top section with our revenue does not include the renewal, but I wanted to see what it would look like with the renewal in there, just to see what the lines look like, what the percentage, the trend is. And so the current income tax levy that we have expires on December 31st, 2023. So we will collect funds from this in the beginning of fiscal year 24. Not 100% of the timing, because most of that should be filed with taxes in April. We could potentially collect in July, which actually will be our fiscal year 24, but probably would collect the bulk of it in October, which is also fiscal year 24. So in order to maintain our funding, we'll need to pass a renewal levy in 2023. Also, I wanted to point out that on the notes that were attached, well, I guess it's all part one file in the 5-year forecast, page 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I had an error that I needed to correct. So our school district income tax expires at December 31, 2023, and we'll need to renew that. We could renew it in 22 or in 23, but I wanted to make sure that the final approved copy says calendar year 22 or 23. And then next in line with that, real estate taxes. Also on that same page, our emergency levy expires December 31st, 2022. I erroneously had 23 in the notes that were posted on board docs. So that expires in 2022. So our real estate taxes make up about 36% of our revenue. In 2020, was a reappraisal year for Greene County, and we estimated a 2.4% value increase for the county. And like I mentioned earlier, we received a 9% increase over the total assessed value. So that's good news. We're anticipating a 95.25% collection rate, which is a little lower than what we have predicted in the past. At this point in time, we don't have any significant data that says that we're going to collect less than that. So moving to the next. This is what the chart looked like. Of course, this is the 2.4% that we estimated, not the 9%, but we've had slight increases of 1.2, 2%, an estimated 2.4. We forecast slight increases going forward, but of course, this fiscal year 21, when we get to the actual, is going to jump up. And this chart is just based on value, not our actual collection. But so the assessed values of our whole school district property have increased with the 1.2 and 2% over the last 2 years. Our other local revenue is open enrollment, tuition, interest, Medicaid reimbursement, dues, fees, rentals, miscellaneous. Is a small part of our budget, but it is significant. We had fiscal year 19 was a bit of an outlier when we received a large Medicaid reimbursement in that 1 year. So that is not quite in line with the others, but we're going to receive less in interest over the next few years due to, of course, declining interest rates and a declining cash balance for us to have invest. The others, though, we're kind of expecting to hold pretty steady. So all in all, not too much of a change over the 5-year period here. And moving on to general fund expenditures. Thought I had a total here. It might be on the next page. So I just wanted to put into a bar, kind of course, our biggest expenses for general fund is wages. Always, we're a service organization. So wages is, I'm going to move on here. Okay, wages is 51% of our budget, benefits 17, and then our next biggest is services at 27%, and that is due to largely due to our outsourcing of transportation, our custodial services. This is also our ESC contract for therapists with the county, psychologist, OT, PT, that type of service. And then a small amount is for materials, capital, and other expenses. But I'm going to go back to that first slide again. We have just estimated slight increases over the 5-year period of this forecast. So most of those we're not expecting to see much of an increase. And of course, wherever we can, we're going to look for decreases. The salaries, of course, are made up of our regular employees as well as supplemental contracts for our coaches and music and those type of things. This also includes substitutes. It includes severance payouts for classified staff. And just again, that our current negotiated agreements expire in 2021. So we will be starting that in the spring for the next, hopefully, 3-year contract. Benefits make up a pretty large chunk of our budget. That's almost $9 million. And that is made up of the STRS and SERS, insurances, workers' comp, unemployment, Medicare, and other payments include tuition reimbursement and perfect attendance incentives, and severance payouts for our certified staff are paid out in the form of annuities. We anticipate that insurances are going to be a big topic at the negotiating table this spring. So like usual, it's a large expense for an employee as well as the employer. Moving on to purchase services, we estimate almost $14.5 million will be spent on purchase services for fiscal year 21. I just wanted to show you what that is made up of. This also includes the open enrollment deduction, community school deductions, tuitions that go to other schools. Those are expenses that are deducted out of our foundation funding from the state. So we actually have no control over those. And that makes up almost $6 million that flows out of our foundation payments each year. This also includes management contracts, the instructional services from the ESC, the property services, which is maintenance repair type of expenses, and our utilities and communication is about 5% of that line. Supplies and materials are about $1.4 million each year. This is a fairly small amount, and most of that is made up of textbooks or online licenses, supplies, which mean like custodial supplies or office supplies, and then of course instructional supplies for students. Small portion of our budget is spent on capital outlay. Most of our building repairs and capital expenses are paid from our PI fund or the classroom facility maintenance fund that we had set up when we built the elementary schools in 2010-12. We do purchase some equipment, some Chromebooks. We've estimated about $300,000 a year for Chromebooks. In fiscal year 19, the $300,000 on Chromebooks was actually paid in fiscal year 20. So 20 looks like it's much higher than fiscal year 19, but it's just the timing of payments. And all of our other expenses are things like auditor, treasurer, bank fees. We have a House Bill 264 energy conservation debt that we pay the principal and interest from the general fund. So like it says, miscellaneous expenses. And this chart looks a little scary. We've been on the upswing as far as revenues have exceeded our expenditures for the last several years. So we have been growing a cash balance a bit, but now we're on the downside of that budget cycle, and our expenditures are going to start exceeding our revenues, and we are going to be spending those budget reserves. This looks a little daunting for fiscal year 25. However, this chart does not include the renewal of the income tax levy or the emergency levy. So I wanted to do another chart that does include that because it's a little more optimistic looking. So as you can see here, the cash balance at least remains above zero. It's not great, but it's just below 10 million. So that would be, cutting it close. But that's not negative. So with the renewal of those two levies, it's much better looking. And then Lastly, we have the ending cash balance in true cash days. And I also wanted to point out that we have the board policy for 60 days of true cash days as a budget reserve. And so again, here is that and where we stand. Of course, you can see fiscal year 23 and 24, 25. We do not have, looks like I'm sorry, looks like I forgot to update the years on that. That should be 18 to 25. So fiscal years 23 and 24, we do not have 60 days of budget reserve available. Again, this is without renewals, so I wanted to do this one again with the renewals included. And as you can see here, we get to fiscal year 25 before we are below that 60-day cash, true cash day threshold. So again, that's a little less daunting. That is the end of my presentation, so I'm willing to answer whatever questions you have, of course.
All right, fellow board members, would anyone like to ask any questions of Ms. Huber?
Ms.
Yes.
Marietta,
Dr. Delaplane?
ask Carolyn to give me back my screen.
Yes, and Ms. Marcus, I did hear you. We'll get you next.
Oh, sure. Ms. Marcus, go ahead.
Well, Carolyn, if you would, first of all, let me say thank you so very much for that presentation. It was very thorough and you really know how to make school funding easy to understand. But if you go back to that renewal chart that you had on the screen, and so the one that looks at what our expenditures as well as revenue would be in the event that we did renew the income tax and the emergency levy, okay? So if you go back and let's look at that chart, what does that take into consideration in terms of the timing of the renewal of those items? Because one, the emergency levy expires in 2022 and the income tax in 2023. Is that what, am I recalling you at your information accurately?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so when we look at the chart that includes the renewals, assuming that all those two items had been renewed, is there a timing at which the renewals would need to happen in order to ensure that the money will be rolling in to our district?
Yes. I confirmed this with the county auditor's office today just to make sure that I was thinking exactly clearly. Now, the emergency levy expires in 2022. The earliest that we could ask for a renewal is November of 22. Now, and we have until the November of 2023 to renew it without impacting our cash flow.
Okay. All right, so if we were to renew it in November of 2022, then the collection would begin when?
If we renewed it in 2022, it would be for a period for beginning 2023 through the next 7 years. The tax year is the 2022 is when this expires, so our collection is 2023. So a new levy would be tax year 2023 would be the first year for collection in 2024.
Okay, and then what about for income tax? The income tax expires in December 2023.
Yes.
Okay, so let's say we renewed that in November of 2023. So then does collection begin immediately in 2024?
Yes.
Calendar year 2024?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Delaplane?
Oh, yes. Cheryl's question is a very good question and a most excellent question. I think it would be helpful, Mrs. Huber, if you construct a timeline. And in that timeline, include for the operating levy, the income tax levy, and the PI, which is coming up for renewal, even though it's not part of this presentation, such dates as when does this levy actually expire? When is the last date to pass a renewal operating levy? For instance, November of 2023. And the last date to pass it to avoid a cash flow, and the last dollar in the door for all three of them, for the PI, the operating levy, and the income tax levy, just as a planning document, so we see what deadlines are coming up for all three exercises in renewals. But I'd like you to do it accurately so I can actually see on a timeline of when we have to move or have finished our efforts.
I do have such a document, so I'm certainly willing to share that. That will be helpful.
I think that's wonderful. And Ms. Huber, I realize that at any given point in time with these 5-year projections, whenever you do a projection, 10 minutes after you shut your computer down, another piece of data comes in. But looking at the real estate value, and it's residential and farmland together as it's presented, but within farmland, within our residential farmland presentation, what's the effect of CAVU taxes for the farmers?
Well, I don't have for the reappraisal. I don't have the numbers for that just yet.
Current.
Well, this is the value that we have. So off the top of my head, or what I have with me today, I don't have that number, but I can get that for you.
Great, that's fine. No big deal, except to say that the CAVU taxes are a bone in the craw of almost every farmer in the township, and probably the number one reason why some of them vote against taxation levels.
Understandable.
Being somewhat associated with farmer types. The district expenses, when you presented them, appear to rise through the years, but in order to set the budget stage and transparency, what options do you propose to avert a financial last-minute crisis? And when should we begin to implement them if things continue as without any hope for renewals?
Well, I think that
considering the renewals.
I think that we are, I know that Dr. Lofton and I communicate frequently about this, about our budget, how every decision we make impacts the budget. And I think we are on the same page that we are constantly looking for ways to reduce our expenditures. Just in this fiscal year, we have reduced 7 teaching positions through attrition. We have talked about reducing through attrition each year. We are also put out to bid the OTPT contract and services that we get from the ESC to make sure that we are getting the best value for our dollar. And so those will be coming to you in the near future, those decisions, of course. So I think that is something that's just continuously happening and that we're constantly looking at and aware of. The 5-year forecast is a tool to make sure that you're looking at those numbers and you can see this gives us, and of course, year 5 doesn't look too good right now. But I also feel like as we are constantly monitoring and constantly looking for ways to reduce our expenses, keeping an eye on our revenue sources, reaching out to our legislators and the governor to let them know how we feel about the fair school funding formula, the Ed Choice vouchers, and those type of expenses that we have no control over. But I think those are the steps that we are taking to make sure that we're getting as much revenue as possible and watching our expenses as closely as possible, just continuously, but especially knowing that this year 5 doesn't look good. And so decisions that we make earlier can have a cumulative effect over the 4 or 5 year period. So at this point, I think that we are in good shape continuing as we have been doing and don't need to necessarily say, oh, we have to make drastic cuts or anything. Of course, because there's 2 bienniums between now and we get to this kind of scary negative balance in fiscal year 25. So there are a lot of things that can change between now and then. But I think as we do the next updates over the next year and 2 years and looking at, that balance is going to be coming close, that negative balance is going to be coming closer to us. It'll only be 3 years out at some point, but maybe some of those revenue figures will change in that time and it won't be a scary negative number anymore. Maybe some of our cost savings measures will have saved us enough budget that it won't be that scary number anymore. So I think it's just constantly something that we have to monitor and adjust to.
Thank you. One more question. What you're implying then is that if you look at line 10.010 at fiscal year 25, it looks like it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $22 to $24 million in the hole. And closing that gap is going to be a little bit difficult, isn't that right?
That is correct.
And then, according to board policy, when the treasurer is aware of a significant budgetary shortfall, the treasurer is to notify the board. And do you consider this your first notification of a potential budgetary shortfall?
Well, I guess I do.
Thank you. And I yield the floor.
All right, Dr. Callahan?
Nope.
Mrs. Bartley? Do you have any questions for Mrs. Huber?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Huber, I wanted to thank you for your presentation as well as the accompanying document for the 5-year forecast. I always enjoy reading through it. I think your explanations are concise and well-reasoned on a very dry topic. And I appreciate your presentation and the charts because the charts kind of help me see the information a different way. So thank you very much for that. At this time, fellow board members, I think we're ready to call the roll on the motion to approve the 5-year forecast. Mrs. Huber, could you please?
Mrs. Marcus,
Yes.
Dr. Delaplane,
Yes.
Mrs. Bartley,
Yes.
Mrs. Marietta,
Yes.
Dr. Callahan.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. The 5-year forecast is approved. At this time, I need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Delaplane. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bartley. Mrs. Huber, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Delaplane,
Yes.
Mrs. Bartley,
Yes.
Mrs. Marcus,
Yes.
Mrs. Marietta,
Yes.
Dr. Callahan, sorry.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Motion passes. We are adjourned at 6:08 p.m. Thank you, fellow board members. Thank you, Dr. Lofton, and all staff that have joined us for the meeting. See you next month.
Everyone have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
You
Lofton.
too.
Same to you all. Okay.